Good morning, Catherine. This morning I woke up and thought, wouldn't it be fun to solve a couple of quadratic equations? So we're going to start with solving a rather simple one, and we're going to use a simple method. And then we're going to solve a more complicated one and use a more complicated method. Let's start with the simple one. Let's call this the brute force method. It's just brute force, meaning that it isn't particularly clever. It's just a easy way to do it. We have our quadratic equation here. Now actually in the face of it, that doesn't look like a quadratic equation because there's only two numbers here to the left and not three. So let's put a third one there, because we know that if you add a zero, it hasn't changed the equation. And now we have a good looking quadratic equation in the right form that you're used to looking at it with. Now, how do we solve for x when we have an x squared and we have an x? It seems a little complicated. Actually, there's a little trick that you can do here. We need to find two numbers, because those are the two possible numbers that x could be in a quadratic equation. So we need this number to have two characteristics. One is that it needs to multiply with this number, the actual number with no x on it. So in this case, 0 multiplies with that number and adds to this number. So multiplies with this number and adds to this number. So that number is -4. Then we got to figure that out. So we always start with the first one, multiplies with 0. Now actually, if you were to write a list of all the numbers that the two numbers that multiply to get together to get 0, it's 0 times every number ever invented, right? 0 times 1 is 0, 0 times 2, 0 times 3, 0 times 4. And you could do this negative too, like 0 times -1 is 0, 0 times -2, and so on, right? But only one of these numbers, so we've already done this task. Only one of these numbers, if you add them together, adds up to -4. So that one doesn't. 0 plus 2 doesn't. 0 plus 3 doesn't. 0 plus 4 doesn't. Clearly the positives are not going to, but 0 plus -1, that doesn't, that's -1. 0 plus -2, we'll factor it out a bit more, that doesn't. But that one does. So the first step here we've done already. Step 1 is to figure out which two numbers multiply to end up with 0 and add up to get -4. Okay, got that? Now, next step is we're going to put these two numbers into an equation. So we'll make it, it's called factoring. So we're going to make this x plus this number and x plus this number. So it's x plus 0, that's one factor. And the other factor is x plus -4 equals 0. So this is actually equal to the same as this. We've just factored it out. If you did it the other way around, you did this, factor these out, you're going to get this. Try it. So now I'm going to simplify it just a teeny bit. X plus 0, okay, that can remain the same. X plus -4 is the same thing as saying x minus 4 equals 0. So when you have one number times another number and it equals 0, the only possibility is that one of these things is equal to 0. I don't know which one. So there's two scenarios. One is that this is equal to 0 and the other is that this x is equal to 0. So what we need to do is to make this x a value where the inside of all of this adds up to 0. So starting with this, what value would x have to be in order for this entire inside to equal 0? And the answer is x would have to equal 0. That's the only number. If x was equal 1, it wouldn't add up to 0. If x was equal to -1, it wouldn't add up to 0. The only way that this x can be worth 0, or sorry, this factor could be worth 0 if you add it together, is that x itself is worth 0. That's quite a special case. This one, what would x have to equal to in order for this equation to equal 0? And the answer is +4, right? because 4 minus 4 is equal to 0. So in either case, this equation works correctly if x is equal to 4, because 4 minus 4 is equal to 0. And then this would factor out as 0, and any number times 0 is 0. Or x is equal to 0, this would factor out to, this would end up equaling 0. And because this is a 0, whatever is in here, when multiplied with 0, equals 0. So that's your possibilities. So that's the very simple brute force method. Now I'm going to show you like a disguised version of brute force. Sometimes you can, so the brute force is like the easiest and the fastest. So if you can do it as brute force, do it. Let's imagine that we have this equation. Looks a little bit more complicated. The reason why is because you've got this 2 in front here, so it looks more complicated. You can't deal with it the same way. Your perfect scenario is when there's no number in front of the x squared. But wait, you can simplify this. This is the same as saying 1x squared minus 4x plus 0 equals 0. X squared minus 4x equals plus 0 equals 0. So I'll be able to get it into this like perfect form here. So when you're doing, when you see your quadratic equation, you know, when you first get it, say, well, can I actually simplify the quadratic equation so that I have an x squared up front? And if you can, then you can use this, you know, very simple brute force method. Okay, so that's the first method that I'm going to show you. I'll stop the video here and then I'll do the x factor method.